Are you searching for that voice of reason in these troubled times? Do some things just not make sense? We thought so too, and that's exactly how Dave, Richard, and I came together. My name is Kelsey, and the three of us are here to explore and seek the truth, expose corruption, and unravel and untwist media lies and propaganda. We are determined to help navigate through this unparalleled, extraordinary time in history with everyday people level, working with what nature has given us and protecting that from those who are exploiting it. Together, with the help of our listeners, we will sow acres of truth. You can visit our website at acresoftruth.com, and here you will find more information on how you can find us in places like YouTube, Rumble, Spotify and Apple Music, Twitter, and so much more. Welcome to our special edition series, SDG'S and What You Need to Know. Together, we will be explaining and discussing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our mission is to educate everyday citizens about SDGs, what they are, what they mean, how the laws and policies that are and have been passed can and will affect us, not only here in Canada, but around the world. Additionally, by learning and understanding these 17 goals, we can all become one step closer in helping to affect change in this world from a grassroots perspective. My name is Kelsey from Saskatoon, along with Dave and Richard. We are Acres of Truth. Joining us is our special guest, Mark, who has been talking about the agenda for 20 years now. Welcome, gentlemen.
Greetings, Kelsey. It's Dave from Winnipeg, Ag Specialist.
Greetings, Kelsey. My name is Richard, and I'm a farmer from southern Saskatchewan.
Hi, Kelsey, Dave, and Richard. It's Mark here from Saskatoon, Director and Founder of the Forum for Canadian Sovereignty.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's get started with Sustainable Development Goal number 7, affordable and clean energy. Goal 7 is about ensuring access to clean and affordable energy, which is key to the development of agriculture, business, communications, education, healthcare, and transportation. The lack of access to energy hinders economic and human development. Latest data suggests that the world continues to advance towards sustainable energy targets. Nevertheless, the current pace of progress is insufficient to achieve Goal 7 by 2030. Huge disparities in access to modern sustainable energy persist. Rising commodity, energy, and shipping prices have increased the cost of producing and transporting solar photovoltaic modules, wind turbines, and biofuels worldwide, adding uncertainty to a development trajectory that is already far below Goal 7 ambitions. Achieving energy and climate goals will require continued policy support and a massive mobilization of public and private capital for clean and renewable energy, especially in developing countries. I'd like to turn the mic over now to Mark to begin our discussion.
This is a big one. So there's, to be quite honest and frank, there's nothing more sustainable and attainable than natural gas and oil. And this idea that we're saving the planet by not using the cheapest source of energy on the planet and most effective and most efficient is insane. And it goes to this idea of controlling resources rather than saving the planet. It has nothing to do with saving the planet. Now we're all stuck in this globalist created vortex of climate change is somehow created by humans and our use of fossil fuels and the creation of more CO2. CO2 is a fundamental building block of all life on Earth. The atmosphere is actually dangerously low as far as parts per million of CO2. We're somewhere in the ballpark of 400 parts per million. If we get to 150 parts per million, all life on Earth begins to die because, as we've mentioned, as we've talked about this Mother Nature and cycle of life that we have here on this planet, It's all connected. And so plants, trees, vegetation all love CO2. They require CO2 in the process of photosynthesis, which then, of course, expels oxygen for us to breathe. So there's a number of other byproducts of more CO2 in the atmosphere. More CO2 creates more plants, bigger trees, bigger leaves, more vegetation, which in and of itself creates and feeds more animals, which then, of course, feeds more humans as this planet continues to populate. The other byproduct of more greening, and there's a study that came out of the Lancet a couple of years ago, it's still on the NASA website, where they brought together a bunch of scientists so the scientists could determine why the planet has been greening so much over the last couple of decades. And I always joke that they could have saved a whole pile of money and called me. I would have told them, I'm an arborist. I own a tree company. I understand photosynthesis. I understand more CO2 equates to more vegetation. And that's exactly what this study determined, that the reason the planet has been greening so much over the last couple of decades is because of higher levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is a good thing because we want more greening, we want more vegetation. And in that, when we have this more greening, it actually cools the planet. So it's this wonderful symbiosis that Mother Nature has created, or God has created, and that's how we survive, and that's how we all flourish, and that's how we all feed each other and heat our homes. This idea that you're going to replace carbon-based fuels or energy with wind or with solar is insane. I mean, you look at some of these solar farms that they've put up, they've completely destroyed the ecosystem that they've placed all of these on. You're placing black panels which only attract the sun's heat, and you're heating the surface of the earth, where we all thought global warming was a thing. Of course it isn't, and it was proven to be not a thing. But all of this that we're talking about within this goal, within this SDG, is to do with control, and it's to do with manipulation, and it's to do with propaganda to capitalize on people's fear. So in 2012, there was a committee in the UN that were trying to figure out the best way to fund this overall agenda. And at that time, they thought and estimated that this agenda would cost $5 trillion annually. They were wrong. It's actually $8 trillion annually. And so they're trying to determine where they can raise all of these funds to fund this insane communist fascist agenda. And so they determined the best way to do that is through a carbon tax and carbon pricing schemes. And I have a document. I can probably send it to you, and you can maybe include it in some of the package that we put together, where it clearly says it has nothing to do with saving the planet, and everything to do with raising funds and sucking and redistributing wealth, sucking as much wealth from Western civilization as absolutely possible, using our fear to do it. And somewhere along the line, all of us forgot grade 8 science when we learned about photosynthesis and how important CO2 is to life on Earth. CO2 is not a poison. CO2 is not the enemy, but it's the enemy they have created through propaganda, through creating narratives, and through this perception versus reality. So this idea that we're going to cut CO2 out of the equation by all of these schemes, net zero and propaganda, is insane. Now, what you'll actually do, and part of this plan, of course, is reducing 30% fertilizer usage, because that's going to take CO2 out of the atmosphere, which is their goal. And again, I'll remind everybody, if we get to 150 parts per million in the atmosphere, all life on Earth begins to die, which leads right into their overall agenda in this Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, population reduction and depopulation. It all funnels into the same idea. And so when you reduce 30% fertilization from farmers and you know cut their industry off at the knees, you're going to create mass starvation and mass famine. And so one of the other byproducts to all of this insanity is, if you look to Germany, Germany has gone to a lot of these new green technologies like wind and solar. And now the people of Germany are actually resorting to going to the forest, cutting down the forest so they can bring the wood back home so they can heat their homes. It's pure insanity. We're doing exactly the opposite of what we need to do, but these people, this whole thing is based on a farce, based on a hoax. It's not real. It's not reality. And unfortunately, this narrative has been, you know, since the 70s. It started with global cooling, this fear mongering. And of course, that didn't work. So the unfortunate thing for the rest of the planet is it's this messaging, this narrative that they've been pushing, this fear mongering through propaganda, has been very effective, and it's convinced people to shut their brains off and not remember how important CO2 is. So CO2 has been created as the enemy, and this this fear mongering has been going since the 70s. We've had, the cooling where everything was going to freeze and we're all going to freeze to death. And that quickly changed into global warming because the cooling projections never materialized. Then, of course, it went from global warming, and those projections never materialized, like New York City would be an aquarium and Florida would be underwater and the ice caps would be gone. Well, none of that's come true. And that was supposed to have happened by 2010. And so, of course, they had to change the narrative again. And this time they changed it to climate change through anthropogenic human causes. We're causing it through CO2, is somehow creating this climate change. And, the fact of the matter is, the climate has always changed on this planet. The day that climate doesn't change is the day that everybody can light their hair on fire. And the really cool thing about humans and humanity is our ability to innovate, our ability to solve problems, our ability to think critically and deal with what Mother Nature hands us. We've been very good at that since the dawn of humanity. And we will continue to be able to adapt and to adjust and to invent and create and build to deal with what Mother Nature hands us. And so this idea that we need this, unelected foreign entity to dictate the terms of our life and our consumption behavior and our patterns and distribution and we need to eliminate CO2 from the atmosphere is complete hogwash. And it's actually dangerous, but it leads right back into, again, what the primary element of this agenda is, and that's depopulation and population reduction. So it's you and us and all of humanity on this planet are the carbon they want to eliminate, as outlined by Dennis Meadows, who wants and believes that we need to go from 7 billion people down to 1 billion people if we're going to manage this. And at the end of the day, that's all hogwash. It's we'll be able to deal with all the challenges Mother Nature throws at us we 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 can deal with our energy needs. And if there ever comes a point where our fossil fuels, our natural gas and oil, is getting dangerously low, which it isn't. It's everywhere around the world, and they're finding more of it and more of it. But if it ever does come to that, we will find another way. We will find another way to create energy that people need. So this whole thing is all about control. It's all about hoarding resources and population control. That's what it all is.
Yes, Mark. So talking from an agriculture standpoint, you're absolutely right. When they cut back as a farmer, when they cut back our fertilizer, it'll be less production, and it'll be actually non-sustainable farming with less food. And as we talked about in other SDGs, but energy is a big part, as you said. CO2 um, helps grow our crops. It's plant food, right? So it just doesn't make any sense to hinder the fuels of agriculture. And I don't think we're going to have an electric 600 horsepower tractors anytime soon. So it just it's killing agriculture. But I think it's just basically taking control again. The governments want control of every aspect of energy and resources, and that's really what they're after. It's not about making it sustainable for the people. It's about them gaining control over everything, and that's really, I think, what we're looking at here. It's going to be devastating to agriculture, I think, when they start cutting fertilizer and fuels and stuff like that, and making us, and that money has to be passed on, obviously. So that's where people will be paying more for their food. So
Yeah, and not only the farming industry, but small and medium sized business. I mean, I'm a small business owner. I run a tree service company, and as far as I know, there's no electric wood chippers in the works. There wouldn't be enough power in them to do what a wood chipper needs to do. I have two trucks that we depend on, to haul wood and to haul chips and to haul whatever else is part of our industry. And so it's not feasible. And I mean, even when we talk about, what's happening in the UK with these 15-minute communities, well, what happens if they bring that here and all of a sudden I can't drive my truck out of my neighborhood to run a business in Saskatoon because I'm paying these exorbitant fines and tariffs because I'm traveling in these vehicles outside of my 15-minute zone that I'm supposed to be cordoned off into. And so all of these things are just pure insanity. It's not going to work. It has nothing to do with saving the planet and everything to do with controlling all aspects of our life. And that's what it boils down to. And Dennis Meadows said it well in when he in the interview that I have posted to my Twitter, that we could, in his words, we could survive very well with 1 billion people on the planet, but we're at 7 billion, maybe 8 or 9 billion, but we'd have to live under a dictatorship. And so they can't eliminate 6 billion people overnight. So until there's all of these mechanisms in place that is reducing the population in his mind and in their mind, we're going to have to live under a dictatorship. And that's exactly what they're moving towards. And people need to understand this. People need to get this and wrap their head around the fact that this is the direction we're moving in. And all of these 17 SDGs that we're talking about all feed into that and controlling all aspects of everybody's life. And that's the end game. And that's what this is all about.
Exactly. And I think to your point, like when you talk about the generators or the horsepower that you are using currently for your wood chippers and stuff, even if they were to find modes of electrifying these devices, we have lots of shortages in the raw materials. the lithium, the cobalt. We're now seeing shortages in copper because the motors that they're making for electric vehicles and other electric devices, they all require miles and miles of copper for every vehicle, for every engine, and those types of things. And now, where's all this copper and these natural resources, this lithium? Where is it coming from, and who's going to be mining it? And let's not forget how it's being mined with diesel fuel.
And where's the electricity coming from to power all of these things? It doesn't exist without fossil fuels, right? Like I see these Tesla charging stations, and right next to them is a diesel generator. In the event that they can't access the electrical grid, or for whatever reason the grid goes down. And this is the thing: is if everybody was on electric and everybody had electric vehicles, there wouldn't be enough power generated anywhere to service all of these things.
Well, and that's just it. I think Kelsey wants to talk a little bit about, some of the wind turbines and the amount of fossil fuel that goes into that. So, Kelsey, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, I do. I happened to be reading about something the other day. It's an announcement, and you're hearing these announcements from all of these companies, green this, clean energy that, and it's the first major U.S. offshore wind farm. So they boast it will create over 3,600 jobs and provide clean energy to 400,000 homes and businesses. So this is 15 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, and it's a joint venture between Avangrid Renewables and Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. So they talk about cost competitive electricity. But my argument to that is, they boast it will create over 3,600 jobs. So that's just a one-time, thing. These are not continuous jobs, correct?
Correct.
And so my questions around this is, what happens with the turbines are out there for our listeners to really understand. So the wind turns the turbine, or the turbine goes at, and those wingspans, I don't even know what are they called, gentlemen? Do we even is there a name? The span of the wing,
Rotors.
The rotors, they turn. But how is it possible to turn if it doesn't have a lubricant? And what is the lubricant that is being used?
Oil.
So does the general public understand this, though, and how many gallons of oil that it takes?
No, the general public won't understand it because they don't talk about it. They don't talk about how much fossil fuels go into even manufacturing these behemoths, and not to mention all the wildlife they kill in the form of birds and what have you. And it's all just ridiculous.
Thank you for joining our Acres of Truth podcast. Dave, Richard, and I invite you to join in the conversation with us over on Twitter. Our handle there is @AcresOfTruth. Yeah, and not to mention that if there is an oil spill, I wonder if people understand how many gallons of water, like 1 gallon of oil contaminates something like 100,000. I'd have to find the stat, but it's a lot of water that 1 gallon of oil can contaminate. So, in essence, are we defeating the purpose here?
Okay. So when we talk about wind farms that are off the coast, there are some points that are not talked about in general, because they kind of take away from the thunder of how effective they are. And so what happens with the blades as they're turning, the wind actually slows down, and it creates turbulence. And so what people don't recognize is there's actually a warming effect in the water below the wind turbines. And so this affects a lot of the aquatic life that's in the water below, because the temperature has now changed. These marine environments are rich with fish and other ecosystems. So the temperature distribution isn't equal, and it's not horizontal. This is a big thing because fish can only survive at certain levels for certain time periods. And their nutrients, what they need for sustenance, is also at certain levels. And this is now disrupted. The other thing, the biomass dramatically increases in and around the wind turbines and the wind farms. This also has a negative effect by reducing the oxygen levels in there, creating a much bigger problem. And this is a habitat that the fish are naturally in, which we presumably we care so deeply about our oceans and our ocean ecosystem. And now we're putting 1,000 gallons of oil into a wind turbine that may leak. We know they have leaked. Into very delicate ecosystems. And you talk about Martha's Vineyard, Elsie. This is just a prime example of where we're not talking about the bigger picture. We're looking at, yes, it's renewable energy, but what effect does it have on the ecosystem? And again, we're trying to micromanage, but we're missing the big picture on the macro scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martha's Vineyard is where this is taking place is 15 miles south of the vineyard, which is just off the coast of Massachusetts. And just to correct myself from before on that fact about the contamination of the water, it's a gallon of oil can contaminate 1 million gallons of water. And then I just wanted to ask one more question, and we can come back to it if this is off what you were wanting to talk about, Dave. But have we discussed yet the recycling of the wind turbines?
Well, no, we haven't discussed that as such, but we do know that there are significant problems, and we're seeing this happen in Manitoba right now. I'm almost on a daily basis seeing new wind blades trucked down the highway for wind farms that have been operational for less than 10 years. Because as some of you know, and the listeners will know, that the leading edge on these wind blades is extremely sensitive. It's made of fiberglass and composites. However, we live in some of the harshest climates around. Winter minus 35, minus 40 is not unheard of, and for a week straight. So the leading edge on these wind blades is constantly being chipped at by the rains, by the ice, snow. Everything affects it. And bird strikes, certainly they do occur, and they do cause damage. So we're seeing premature failure. We were told on the onset, these things have a lifespan of 20, 25 years. Well, here we are 2 years into the wind farm where we had to replace all the bearings because they were substandard and couldn't handle the Canadian climate. So we have 2 wind farms in Manitoba that completely got overhauled. Now, 10 years after the fact, we're replacing leading edge blades. And so what is happening to the blades at the end of their life cycle? And it's my understanding that they're going straight to the landfill because of these composites and fiberglasses, you can't easily recycle them, and it's cost prohibitive. It's not even feasible to recycle them. Makes no sense. So and in Manitoba, because that part of the operation is run by Manitoba Hydro, which is hydroelectric, they have said we will do no more expansions of wind farms because they are cost prohibitive.
Right.
And again, this is where the economics fail. And Mark, you alluded to cheap energy, and that is what the consumer wants. And we need to strive to give the best energy for the best price.
But you see what's happening now with with the traditionally cheap and efficient and effective energy in the form of fossil fuels. You see what's happening where they're now manufacturing crises to blame the rise in fuel costs, the rise in in gasoline prices or diesel prices. All of this is manufactured. None of this needs to happen, but it's pushed to happen to discourage people from filling their tanks and going to these alternative means of energy. And so all of this, everything that we're witnessing, gasoline at the pumps should still be at around $1 a liter. There's no way they should be at $1.74, $1.94, whatever it is, $1.99 for diesel. There's no reason for it, but other than to discourage its use, making it cost prohibitive for people. It's all manufactured. It's all orchestrated. all of this is again, to demonize the use of fossil fuels.
Well, and this is takes me into my next point here on the Arizona solar farm. The loans on this project are the responsibility of the taxpayer. And so the electricity that's generated does not pay for the loans that this $2 billion project took. It went way over budget. It was actually obsolete before it was completed because the technology had advanced that quickly, and the cost or the production time took years to get it on board. And so the thing that concerns me again, and we talk about this whole green thing and environmentally and sustainable and all this. Well, what is used to cool all these systems or to transfer the heat? And this is a toxic sludge that is superheated. Hairline crack develops, and they've had several of these. Their staff are well versed in dealing with daily spills. The molten hot fluid releases into the atmosphere. In a recent case, there was 7 tons of material that was released into the atmosphere. And this is a toxic chemical. It's dangerous to breathe. It's a biphenyl chemical. And so there too, it's like we know accidents happen, with oil and gas. Should something happen, it stays in the ground. We can use soil remediation. We can correct that. When something goes off and blows into the air and, oxidizes, it moves with the wind. There is no way to recapture this. And you have like an estimated 1,000 gallons that went up into the air, into the surrounding neighborhoods. And thank goodness this was in the middle of the desert. But again, we're changing the climate. We're superheating everything. And how are we to, kind of cool the earth, so to speak, because that's what their agenda is. But into that, I want to tie this back into what Richard said earlier, and you alluded to as well. Should this whole climate warming thing be a thing, and I'm not certain that it is, it would actually be beneficial for Canadian farmers because we could grow some warm crops. We could grow them further up north. And as we all know, and maybe our audience isn't aware, Canada produces some of the best products around. Like the crops we produce, our farmers are using state-of-the-art technologies. We are amongst the most responsible for all of our ag uses and inputs. And so that would be a huge win for Canada and the world as such, because now we are not exporting all of our problems to developing countries where there are no standards, there are no regulations. It's a free-for-all. Our Canadian farmers know what it means to be stewards of the land, and the vast majority are. And we needn't take that away.
And our energy companies as well.
Absolutely.
Like we're the cleanest energy exploiters, I guess we can call it, on the planet. We know what we're doing. We know how to do this. And you see reclamation sites, and they're pristine. They look great. Why? Because fossil fuels is nature. That it's what it is. All of this natural gas, it's in the name, and our oil, it's all from nature. And so it's all part of this wonderful system that we have. And we're just contributing to that system and working with nature rather than against nature. And everything that they want us to do, it goes against nature, goes against all of this.
Well, exactly. And we should be exploiting and using the resources that are readily available. And in Manitoba, hydroelectric makes sense. There may be areas where a wind farm might make sense or a solar farm, but not in prime real estate or prime agricultural communities. We shouldn't be creating vast fields of solar panels when we can be growing nutritious food. The part that and feeding the planet. And what really bothers me is when we're comparing wind, solar, nuclear, hydroelectric, all these sources against solar and wind. almost always you will see a reference to coal. And so, yes, coal is a higher polluter than these other methods, but it's like that's where you get the big hook for the consumers to say, you know what, coal is bad and wind and solar is good. But we're missing the conversation about how reliable is nuclear energy, how safe is it, and how cheap it is. Same with hydroelectric. Again, we're never comparing apples to apples. It's always apples to oranges, apples to grapes. Unless you are digging in, you aren't getting a true picture.
And then, of course, you have all of the cobalt mining to build these lithium batteries around the world that are largely serviced by child labor and slaves for the most part, and the destruction of the ecosystem wherever these cobalt mines and these lithium mines are is just it's phenomenal. And if people understood, how much of these resources it takes just to build one car, it's mind boggling. But people don't understand all of these things, and they really need to understand that none of these green technologies that they keep promoting in favor over, the old reliable fossil fuels, are nothing what they've been propagandized as. They the cost and the detriment to ecologies and to humanity far exceeds anything that our natural resources like oil and gas have been, far exceeds anything that detrimental that we can consider our oil and gas to be.
Yeah, and the exemptions that these corporations get. So if you look at an electric vehicle, uh, it's calculated in tons of CO2, but the calculation does not always include the refining, the accessing of all the raw materials that are required to actually get this product to market. So you're only seeing half, maybe two-thirds of that equation. So, and again, the electric car starts off with a much higher CO2 footprint, and you actually have to drive it for a period of several years, 7 to 10 years, before it equals an internal combustion engine.
And none of this is to suggest that any of us want to destroy our lakes and our rivers and our ecosystems. We actually, I think we all have a really good handle, especially industry in this country has a really good handle on protecting the lands in which we pull these resources from. We know how to do business. We know how to do this, and we should be leading the world, and we should be showing other parts of the world how to do it properly, how to do it in the cleanest way. And I mean, we should be celebrated rather than demonized. I mean, Canada is always demonized because we have so many resources that the world wants and needs, and we should be absolutely booming with prosperity because of the resources that we've been blessed with, and you know getting them from the ground in the cleanest way. It's all just so frustrating that so many people have bought into this propaganda and into this narrative that they've pushed, that they've been very effective pushing.
No, I was just going to say we all we do the most sustainable, you know, the cleanest energy. We provide the cleanest energy around, as far as technologies and the way we do it, the way we extract it. We know it's the most environmentally friendly on the planet, and to say we should shut ours down to enrich a country like China who has no environmental regulations at all is just
Well, and this is because they're exempt. Because when we're talking about the Paris Accord, which a lot of this flows from, China is exempt. India is exempt. All of these big emitting countries are exempt. Yet we're bought into it. We're going to meet some targets. And it's interesting to look at the province of Saskatchewan. We had one coal mine that was quite valuable to our energy needs. and we have to mothball it, or we have to come up with a $3 billion carbon capture situation, which is also insane. And so we have to do all of these things while China on an annual basis is building 49 coal plants annually. I mean, it's insane, but that's how the world's working. And so it's again this attack on Western civilization, and our contribution to humanity is under attack because of virtue signaling, because everyone says this is the thing that we have to do, and the people buy it, and instead of understanding all of these things, they just swallow it whole, and here we are. So hopefully what we're doing here with this project will help educate, I'm hoping, a lot of people across this country and around the world.
Are you enjoying this episode? You can find all previous episodes at acresoftruth.com.
And we need to encourage investors to come back into Canada. They are being stifled with mountains of regulation, paperwork, and they're just finding it easier to do business in countries like Mexico, or as you said, China, India. They're just going to go elsewhere. For them to pick up their dollars and leave the country, which they largely have already. But some of them are still keeping an eye on Canada. Should things turn around, they would come back. And I'll just leave you guys with one example here. When we look at Bipole 3, which was a hydroelectric line that Manitoba Hydro put in, came in twice over budget. It is already running at capacity because we're exporting it to North Dakota and Minnesota and using it in our province. But the crazy thing is they would like more of our Canadian energy. And for, let's say, a Bipole 4 line to be coming into the works, which has already started, the people that I'm talking to, by the time this will be hitting the ground through fruition, is 20 to 25 years down the line. That's how crazy the paperwork is and how crazy the processes are.
Well, and just to expand a little bit on your point, so we have all of the resources the world wants and still needs, regardless of what the narrative is. We have this. We have, and so we need to make the distinction, and it's important we make the distinction between globalization and globalism. Those are two very different things that in this discussion need to be, the distinction needs to be made. And globalization, of course, is the economy and how we have to play a role in that through exporting our resources and all of the riches that we have, so that we can prosper and that we can take care of our healthcare system and our social programs and our social safety net and all these other special things that we take pride in. But we have to be an active partner in that. We have to play in this globalization. Now, of course, the world's getting smaller through innovation in transportation and innovation in communication and all of these things. And so we understand that, and we have to play a role in all of this, especially with our farming and all the resources that we have. But we have to make these decisions in the best interests of Canadians and the best interests of our industries, and do what's best for the people of Canada, rather than ceding our sovereignty to an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity that creates all of these policies that are completely insane and have nothing to do with the prosperity of our nation of Canada. And this is what's so wrong with a supranational agreement like the Sustainable Development Agenda. It's this clearly identifies what's wrong with just following along with what's been created as a narrative and a perception that's been created by these people who only want control of what we own as a nation.
Exactly. And you can only think of the 350 to 500,000 immigrants that Canada is taking on an annual basis right now. everything is a reduction, yet you see an influx of people, and the death rate, is by far overshadowed by the immigrants. So, yeah, we got lots to chew on, lots to dive into, and to keep working at this. So
That's a wrap, folks. You've been listening to an Acres of Truth special edition podcast series. We would like to thank you so much for joining us in this journey. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with others on your social media platforms. Be sure to check out our website, acresoftruth.com, for more information on other podcasts and where you can find them. Additionally, feel free to send your questions or comments to info@acresoftruth.com. Thanks again for listening.